Well, thank you, David. Thank you for that introduction, and thanks for the University of Michigan to kick off this very important symposium. I'm so pleased that the Institute for Social Research and the Ford School of Public Policy is convening this conversation. Without question, it is absolutely critical that we have a comprehensive and an accurate census drawn up. But despite the importance of the census, many folks don't really appreciate exactly how important this exercise is. First, deals a great deal with the form of government we have and representation. As an elected federal official, I can tell you it's incredibly important when it comes to redistricting and to the establishment of our legislative branches. As a member of the Senate, it doesn't matter as much, given the fact that I represent a state and not a district, but I served in the House of Representatives for a number of years, and I can tell you that it makes an incredible difference when it comes to that body. Our founders laid the groundwork for American democracy on the vision that the U.S. House would basically be the place where every one individual gets one vote. We know that isn't necessarily the case in the Senate when you have small states that have 2 senators and 1 House member, and places like California that have a whole lot of House members and still just 2 senators as well. But James Madison described the House of Representatives as the legislative body with an immediate dependence on and intimate sympathy with the people. That's the goal of that, and it's important to have then districts of equal size and to make sure that we're counting every individual for that. So previous to our founders putting the census in such an important role, they have been used to assess taxes, to confiscate property, to draft citizens into the military. So the idea of a census wasn't new to the founders, but the concept of turning the census into a tool for democracy truly was revolutionary at the time. And while the Constitution is explicit about the census role in democracy, the survey's ramifications, as we heard earlier, stretch well beyond representation in Congress. Information produced by the census is a lifeline for communities throughout our state here in Michigan and across the nation, and impacts everybody's lives in very direct ways. It determines what communities get in terms of federal funding for highway projects, for police and fire department personnel, Medicare and Medicaid, for seniors, children and working families who rely on quality care, and programs like Head Start that provide education for our children. But giving government programs, as all of you know, are not the only ones that rely on this census data. Inaccurate counts will also impact the decisions in private industry that use the census as to where to locate offices and where to recruit people, and the list goes on in private industry. And there are even less tangible but equally important implications for the census data. For example, since individuals of Middle East and North African descent do not have a designated category in the census, they are not eligible for protection under Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act, which ensures, among other things, the availability of foreign language ballots. Researchers also use census data to monitor everything from health disparities among specific populations to employment discrimination. This is important research information for us to create a more equitable society. The census is, without question, and I'm preaching to the choir here, I know, it's a source of valuable information. But I think today, and what is the importance of this symposium today, and what we're going to be hearing in the hours ahead, is to recognize that the risk and the challenges the Census Bureau now faces, less than 2 years away from 2020, are significant. The security and integrity of the census collection tools and resulting data is paramount to a successful survey. But since 2010, the risk and threats from our cyber infrastructure have grown exponentially across both the private sector and federal government. And whether it's cyber criminals assessing troves of customer data from Target and Equifax, or foreign governments like China stealing personal information of federal employees, the threats are certainly very real and the risks are very great. And while the Census Bureau is certainly making progress in its preparedness, as we heard from the previous speaker, security vulnerabilities have not been mitigated sufficiently in my mind. And as a member of the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee and the Senate Commerce Committee, both committees have jurisdiction over the census as well as jurisdiction over cybersecurity in the country. And as a member of these committees, I've joined my colleagues to exert some influence over the census planning and execution for the 2020 census. I recently joined 7 of my colleagues in requesting that the Government Accountability Office assess the IT security and readiness of census systems. Without question, a breach of Americans' personal information would be absolutely disastrous, but it could also have a lasting impact on the integrity of the census for years to come by sowing distrust and discouraging response rates. Earlier this year, the GAO identified over 3,000 security vulnerabilities, and unless the Bureau can address them in a timely manner, the reality is that this critical survey remains vulnerable to those who would do us harm. As GAO continues to monitor the security challenges surrounding the census, I'm going to be working with both Republicans and Democrats in Congress to help make sure that Americans' personal information is indeed secure. And maintaining the integrity of the census is paramount, and we must resist, and this is critical, resist efforts to use it as a political tool. Like many people, I'm very concerned by Secretary Ross's abrupt decision and continued insistence on adding an untested question about citizenship that will likely impact the accuracy and the cost of the survey. Not only will the Census Bureau employees have to travel to communities for in-person follow-up, a significant investment of time and taxpayer money, but adding the citizenship question in such a troubling way, I think, serves to spread the mistrust that we need to try to mitigate. As many of you know, 6 lawsuits have been filed to prevent the citizenship question from being added to the 2020 census. The largest of these lawsuits is New York versus the Commerce Department. Documents filed by the Commerce Department in this case provide compelling evidence that the stated reason for adding the citizenship question, which was that the Justice Department needs the data to properly enforce the Voting Rights Act, was merely a cover for what appears to be purely political motivations. The fact that the White House is fighting to delay the trial, knowing that initial testing and preparations for the census are well underway, is unsettling, to say the least. And their continued attempts to permanently block lower court orders allowing Secretary Ross to be questioned illustrates their fear that the truth may come out and they will be shown to have acted in bad faith. When juxtaposed with the Bureau's failure to include a Middle East, North African, or MENA designation, despite years of intensive research and community engagement, I'm disappointed that this inconsistent use of trusted survey methods. Even minor changes to the census forms can have a significant impact on response rates, undermining data accuracy and increasing the overall cost of it as well. Typically, even small proposed changes to the census go through extensive research and testing, consistent with statistical analysis provisions and principles, in order to account for unintended consequences. In March, I joined my colleagues in introducing legislation that will protect the accuracy of the census and ensure any proposed changes to the count are properly studied, researched, and tested. Pretty radical concept, I understand. Among other provisions, the bill prevents the Secretary of Commerce from implementing major operational changes that have not been researched and tested for at least 3 years prior to the census. With the census at such a critical juncture, I have been very vocal in pushing the President to quickly nominate a new Census Bureau director. It's extremely important that a nonpartisan entity like the Census Bureau have a nonpartisan, experienced, and scientifically qualified public servant at the helm. After leaving the position vacant for a year, President Trump nominated David Dillingham to be the Census Bureau director. I've had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Dillingham in my office and a few weeks ago and discuss what I think should be priorities that he should pursue if confirmed. And I called on him to take action to earn public trust in the census, even in this current political environment that is, let's say, filled with discord and uncertainty. I urged him to recognize which actions have been taken or what decisions have been made that may have contributed to a lack of trust in the census. That means being honest about the potential impacts of the citizenship question and trying to educate the public to how they can separate fact from fiction. A very big topic in today's political environment. Everyone should feel confident that the information the census collects as part of this critical effort will not be misused, mishandled, or manipulated in any way. We all must recognize our role in the education of the public to contribute to a successful survey central to the economic and social well-being of our country. And that's why it is so important to what you are all discussing today. I hope that these discussions are informative and productive, and I look forward to hearing what comes out of this very important symposium. So thank you for what you're doing.